Hey, I'm Lee Waller and welcome to this tutorial. Today I'm taking a look at text in Unreal Engine 5.4's new motion design tools. Here I have created this small space with a couple of words being animated, and so I'm going to take a look at that. Let's get started. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start a new level. So let me go up to File, New Level, and I'm going to select this empty level here and create. And let me save my old level. So that will start me off with a clean slate. A couple of things I need to do. I need to jump into selection mode here and go to motion design. And then I'm also going to bring up my other motion design tools by clicking right there on motion design. And you'll see our layout here. I have nothing in the scene right now, so I'm going to create defaults. Click that button right there, and we're going to spawn these items. The default scene route, a directional light skylight, post-process volume, and a camera. So those items we're going to add in. We can jump over here now to the motion design outliner right here and take a look at that. There are those items that we just added in. I'm going to make an adjustment to the post-process volume. So I'm going to click there, jump down into the details from that and go to exposure. I'm going to click on metering mode and change that to manual. And then I'm going to bring up the exposure to 10, the exposure compensation there. That will light our scene for us at first. We'll add some other lights in as we move through this. All right, so let's add some text. I'm going to come over here to my Place Actors panel, and you'll see that we have 2D shapes, 3D shapes. I need to go down to Actors. Let's select Actors, and there is the Text Actor button. Double click on it, and it adds a text actor into the viewport. Selecting it, you'll see that it's also selected up here in the motion design outliner. With that selected, below that, you'll see our details panel. And in our details panel is where we're going to do most of the work. I am going to go ahead and scale this up. That is the way that you set the size of the font in Unreal. So I'm going to go ahead and scale this up to 2. The nice thing about Unreal Engine's motion design tools is that they are 2D and 3D. And so right now this text is just 2D. I'll rotate it to show you. You see that it's just flat 2D text. And of course, Unreal Engine also works with 2D shapes. So you have the option to work with both 2D and 3D shapes. The same with the text. So it starts out as 2D text. And in all of these properties here, we will be able to create whatever type of text we want. The next section that I want to look at right here is the text. And you'll see the text box right here. This is for us to change the actual content, the word of the text. So I'm going to go ahead and type in Unreal. And you'll see that changes the text in the viewport. And if I want to, and for this I want to enforce uppercase on all of them. So I'll click that box right there. And if I want to change the font that I'm using, we'll drop down right here to the motion design font, click on that drop down menu. You'll see there that we have project fonts and system fonts. This is a little bit different than most text editors because most of the time you just work with the system fonts. Once you've found what you're looking for, simply add it. And then when you see here in the motion design font now, you'll notice this new little button, Import System Font to Project. Click on it. And now when we go back into the font menu, you will see that that has been added to the project. You can see there below the typeface option. So if that font has multiple different types of typefaces, you'll be able to select those. Below that is layout options, and I do like to go ahead and align this center. What that does is sets the text pivot point to the center of the text. That just helps me when I'm trying to align things. We have kerning options here, and that is going to separate our fonts, the distance between our individual fonts. We have line spacing, which right now I find interesting because I have not found a way to create a paragraph with this text. It's just a single line. So at this point, I've not found a use for line spacing. Word spacing is, yes, if we do have in the one line multiple words, we can change the spacing between those words. And then if we want to create a space for our word spacing, we can set a max width and a max height. I'm going to click those on. and you'll see this little bounding box that it creates. So if we want our text to stay within that, you can see that it's pretty squeezed. We can set that max width and height, and then we can adjust that as needed. I'm going to come back in just a couple of minutes to this text 3D character transform and take a look at that. That's actually the way we're going to animate this text. Like I mentioned earlier, this is just flat 2D text. And so now in the geometry tab, we have the ability to actually extrude this and give it some depth. Let me go up here and I'm going to rotate this again so we can see the extrusion and drop back down to the extrude, and I'll increase that, and you can see that that font begins to extrude. Go ahead and set that to 30. Now, it's difficult to see right now. This is really based all on materials and how we begin to add materials to this. But right now, this white color is just all blurring together. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and add in some materials to our text now that we have a few options. I will bevel this. I'm going to go ahead and set the bevel to 1 for right now. And again, we cannot see that, but I'll explain that in just a minute. So I'm going to drop down here to materials. And we have a front material, a bevel material, the extrusion, and then the back material. The front material, of course, is the front face of the text. For this, I've already created some materials. At the end of the tutorial, I'll go over how I created those materials. But for right now, I'm just going to go ahead and locate those materials. The first one is a yellow. And there's my yellow material. I'm going to select it. Now the bevel, which I'll explain in just a minute, but I'm going to go ahead. There's a gold material that I want to add. You'll see now that bevel right there. The extrusion, I have a blue material that I want to add. Select that. And I'll go ahead and add this same yellow to the back face. So adding those materials in really helps us see our text, especially in this 3D shape. So I want to bring the text closer to us. So I'm going to jump up here to location and bring that a lot closer so that we can see that bevel a little bit better. So we've extruded it and we've added this bevel. The bevel right now is a convex bevel, and I'm going to increase the size of that so that you can see. We can make it look like bubble shape type text based on the size. Let me set that back down to 1. Let's take a look at the bevel types. Again, we're looking at the convex. Linear is just an angle that goes from the face to the extrusion there. It's just a flat angle. Half circle. Half circle works as if we have gone around the edge of it, adding like a half of a tube to the edge of this. Concave, instead of rounding the edge outward, it rounds the edge inward. One step is exactly one step from the face to the extrusion. Two steps, exact same thing, 2 steps from the face to the extrusion. And then engraved. Engraved is very similar to that half circle. Now, I have noticed, see right here, if we increase that bevel, the geometry really starts to mess up. So on the engraved, and I believe it is the half circle, we get this weird geometry. There is a way, I believe, of fixing this, but you have to go into modeling mode to do that. So just be careful on those two. All of the others don't seem to have that issue. I am going to go back to concave, and I'm going to drop this down to 1.5. So let me reset this and push that back in space. So now let's go in and take a look at our text 3D character transform. Like I said, this is where we can do some of the animating for this text. I'll jump into location first. We'll need to enable that. And location progress is the way that we will most of the time animate this. So I'm just going to scrub through there, and you can see that it is moving away from us. And when I come back to 0, you'll see that it comes back to its original position. That is based on the location distance. And right now on the X factor, it is 100 units away from the original position. So that's why it is moving away and then back. So I can come in here and I can set these We do 200 also, and we progress through that. And so you can see how useful that can be. Now I'm going to go ahead and set this, the first two to 0, and then I'll set the Z-axis to 300, and we'll progress through that. And you can see that we can animate in, animate out of our viewport. Let's take a look at scale. Very similar to that. And so again, using that progress bar there, it is scaling from 0 up to 100% based on our begin and end properties right there. So you can adjust those. So I can set this to 0 and then set this to 1, and we'll take a look at that. So there's many different ways that you can adjust it. We also have the order for each of them that can be changed. Normal, from center to center, and opposite. And so you can work with those options also. So I'm going to adjust the scale range to 100%, and they're all scaling at the same time. Or I can bring that down to 0, and you'll see that they all scale in one at a time, separately. So you have that option on all three also to change the range. To build the rest of our scene, we're going to need to create a back wall and a floor. So I'm going to come over here to 2D shapes and I'm going to double click on the rectangle. That rectangle is right there in the middle. I'm going to take a look at the properties for that. We'll go ahead and label this back wall. And I'm going to go ahead and set this to about 250 units away. And I'm going to drop down here to the shape size, and we'll just set this to maybe 2,000 by, 2,000. So that's constrained together, and I'm going to add a material to this. I'm going to go with the simple material, just going to change the color right there. Click on that, and I do have a hexadecimal for that. I'm going to copy that and punch that in real quick and hit OK. So that's our back wall. I'm going to duplicate that and make that our floor also. Control C, Control V, and I'll just label that floor. And we'll need to rotate it 90 degrees, somewhere in there. And then I'm going to need to push it down. Okay, so I have, and this is one of the little things that I'm not sure if it's a glitch, if it's just something they haven't addressed yet, but I've applied this blue material to this 2D shape. And it is, I'm going to hide the back wall just to show you what's going on. This is a one-sided object or material. And right now, it is only showing up on the front face. We're actually looking at the back face. So if I go back in here and rotate this, there's that material. Okay, so that can be a little confusing. And I'm not real sure right now how this is all going to turn out, if they're going to fix that. Now, there is another way of dealing with that. And I'll show you this real quick. This is just one of those little gotchas that I've run into. So there's our front face. I'll go back to the back face of this, and you can see that this material is not showing up on the back face. I'm going to double click on the material, and it opens up this material editor, and I'll review all of this just a little bit later, but I'm going to make this a two-sided material. I should have done that from the beginning, but I failed to. And I'll apply that and save that, and then we'll close this material editor out. And now both sides are showing up. So that's just one of those little gotchas that you kind of have to be aware of. So let me bring back in my back wall now. And we'll get that in place. I think now will be a good time to take a look at a little bit of the lighting that we are using. So I'm going to open up the default scene. And what we have is a skylight and a directional light that's lighting up the scene. The skylight, we'll dig into it real quick, is mostly being lit by this HDRI. This is just an image that is being used to add lighting to the whole scene. And then the directional light, I'm going to turn it off. And actually, I'm going to have to jump out of our camera right here, and I'll move back and just give us a bit different view. There's our skylight right there. That's our skylight. So if I turn that off, and then if I also turn the directional light off, you see everything goes dark as it should. So these are the two lights that we have. And so we can adjust these lights. We're actually going to add in other lighting a little bit later, but I wanted you to see how this scene is being lit. And so let me go to the directional light and go back into our camera. And what I need to do is actually make an adjustment to this directional light because the angle is not down low enough. So we'll select the directional light and then come into rotation. And on the Y-axis, we're going to bring that down a bit. And you'll see the shadow back there also. And so that takes care of our lighting for right now. I want to continue building our back wall here. The next object that I'm going to add is a chevron, and we're going to do a little bit of work with it. The chevron is in there. Let me go ahead and push this back to 239. Our back wall is at 240. I want that in front of the back wall, so I move it to 239 on the X-axis there. And we're going to add some modifiers to this. So I'm going to go into Operator Stack. And I'm going to add in the mirror modifier. And probably will be helpful if I just go ahead and hide this text right here. So to show you the chevron without the mirror modifier, there's the chevron. And then with the mirror modifier on, there it is, just basically mirroring right there in the center. And we're going to make some adjustments to it. So I'm going to go to the frame position here. And on the Y property, add that to 90. And we're going to leave the frame rotation as is. And I'm going to deselect weld along plane. And then we're going to add another modifier to this. We're going to go back into modifiers and we'll go down to pattern. And you can see there's our pattern, and we're just going to need to make a few adjustments to this. So let me open this up and open our line options there. And we're just going to go to repeat count and bring that up 6 or 7 there. And then I'll just go back into the motion design outliner and duplicate that. And can move that up. And I'm just doing this real quick just to add some texture to our background. I should have on this first one gone in and changed the color, but I'll do that here. To change the color, come down here and I'm going to leave it on a simple color. I'll just adjust this. I have a hexadecimal for this color right here. Just add that in and hit OK. And I'm going to need to do that to the other chevrons. That's why I should have done that earlier. And for each of them, I am going to make sure that they do not cast shadows. So in the properties there, I'm going to go through each one of them and select and tell them to not cast shadows. Before I animate the first text, I'm going to duplicate it and select it and hit Control D to actually duplicate it. And then the second one, we'll come back to it. I'm going to hide it for right now. So we're only working with our first text layer here. And we'll actually start animating. So with that selected, I'm going to make a little more room here. I'm going to drop down into my settings, and we're going to need to go to the Text 3D Character Transform. And we will, on this first one, animate the location and the scale. So I'll start with location. We're going to just set these properties here, and we'll create the animation by using the location progress. I want this property in the sequencer down here. And that is a nice thing about Unreal, because any of the properties that can be animated, they have this little keyframe icon right here. I can click on that, and it's going to add that text character and that property that I want to animate into the sequencer. I do need to make some changes to my sequencer real quick. I'm going to set my frame rate to 24 frames per second. And I'll go ahead and add 10 seconds to this. So I'm going to set up 240 frames. And then I need to click on the set playback end to right there. So our beginning is at the green line and our end is at the red line. And this is our timeline indicator. And you'll see that we have a keyframe set right there at the beginning. I'm going to slide through this just to show you how this is going to come in. It's coming in starting with the L. I actually want it to start with the U. So I'm going to change the location order from normal to opposite. And then what we will do is we will set our first keyframe at 100% on the progress. So let me jump to that keyframe and set that again to 100. Make sure that that is set. And so now that first keyframe right there is set progress at 100%. We're going in the opposite direction. And then I'm going to jump 36 frames into the timeline. And then I will adjust the progress back to 0 and set that keyframe. And so we've created our first animation. We'll go back to the beginning of the timeline, hit play, and the text animates in. I'm going to add one more animation to this, and I think this time I'm going to use rotation. So let me open up the rotation properties there. We're going to need to activate that. And I'm going to make an adjustment to this. Rather than on the y-axis rotating it, I'm going to rotate it on the z-axis, and I'm going to set that to -90. And we'll take a look at the progress. So that's how it's going to come in. So I'll set my progress to 0. And I need to, let me jump back to the beginning of the timeline to set this first keyframe right there. Rotate progress, we'll set a keyframe and add that object and property into the timeline, into the sequencer. And so there's our first keyframe set. Then I'll jump again to 36 frames in the sequencer. And we will set that now to 100% and add that keyframe in. So we've animated both of those. Let's take a look at that. So we don't really see the rotation happening. So what I'm going to do is I want these animations to end at the same time, but I need to delay the start of the rotation. So I'm going to grab the first keyframe and just drag it back just a little bit. We may have to adjust this some more, but let's see what that does. Okay, that's a lot better. We're seeing a little bit of the rotation, and we can play around with that to see if we want to add a little bit more to it. All right, that's looking good. Let me jump back one more time, take a look at it. So after they animate in, we want to hold for just a moment. So I'm going to jump to 60 frames in the timeline, and I'm going to set a keyframe right there. And so it will animate in, and then it'll hold for just a moment. And then that is where we will start our second animation to animate this out. And I want that animation out to take about 36 frames. So I'll set it right there at 90. And we're just going to reverse that progress on the location and set that keyframe. And so there is our first animation. Let me go back to the beginning. Animates in, it holds, and then it animates back out. So to animate our second word, I'm going to come up here to our copy, and we'll bring that visibility back in. We actually need to change that to the word text, exclamation mark. And I'll also change it up here in the outliner so that we know that is the second word. I want to start this animation at 64 frames in. So let me set that to 64. And I'll hide the first word there just so we can see this better. We're going to animate this on location. So with the word text selected in our motion design outliner, I'm going to drop down here to our 3D character transform properties. We already have the location enabled on that. We're going to fix some settings here very quickly. On the location distance, let's set that to 0. Then 365, and then 0 out. So on the X is 0, on the Y is 365, and on the Z is 0 right there. And I'll change the progress to 100. That's where we're going to have it start. And with that set, I'm going to add this property to the sequencer. Hit the keyframe icon right there. The text layer is added in with that property there at 64. I want this to go for 36 frames. So I'm going to set that to 100. And then we'll move that progress bar back to 0 and set that keyframe. Let's take a look at that real quick. And I want to set this because of the way that this is coming in. You see that it's reversed. So I'm going to set that to opposite. And so now that second line of text is animated properly. Let's bring in our first line of text and watch it all together. Jump back to the beginning. So I want to use scale to animate this out. I'm going to set my timeline indicator to 124 frames. That's where I want the animation to begin. And so we will set the progress to 100%. We'll leave the order at normal. And then we're going to make a change to our scale begin and scale end right there. On the begin, let's set the X to 1 and the Z to 0. And then on the scale end, we'll leave everything to 1. Then jump back up and we'll set a keyframe for that scale progress right there at 124. And then we'll jump to 148, make this a 1 second animation. And we'll bring that progress back down to 0 and make sure we set that keyframe. So let's take a look at our animation now. The next thing I want to do is work on lighting. We have some shadows that are problematic for me. I don't like those shadows. I actually want to eliminate those shadows. We're going to add some lighting into this to kind of shape it more the way that I want it to look. The first light I want to add in is a spotlight. So I'm going to come back over here to my panel. If for some reason you do not have these 3 options here, go up to your motion design button. Click on it. It's going to ask you if you want to step out of the motion design. Say yes, and then just click it back, and it should bring up these 3 options. I'm going to go into lights, and I'm going to double click on the spotlight. That spotlight is in there. You'll see it in my motion design outliner. I'm going to select it, and I can start bringing it up so I can see it. This little X right here, to get rid of that and fix the issues that may come up with it, just come over here to the details panel and change that from stationary to movable. And then I'm going to set this to location wise on the Z axis to 420. That's going to bring that up. And everything else will stay the same on location, rotation, and scale. As far as the light and the intensity units, I'm going to change that from unitless to lumens. And then I'm going to set the lumens to 675. I'll make a few more adjustments to this. I'm going to leave the light color as is. And the attenuation radius, I'm going to set that to 800. The inner cone, I'm going to set that to 30. And the outer cone to 40. The source radius, I'm going to set that to 215, and I'm going to leave everything else as is. I am going to tell it not to cast shadows. So I'm going to click that off. The next light will be a rect light. Double click on that and make sure that it is selected. It's right there. We'll bring it up. I'm going to do the same, make it movable. And we're going to make some adjustments to this. On its location, I'm going to bring it forward a bit. And so we'll set that to a -320. As far as height goes, I'm going to set that to 27. I'm using this to light up our text. On the units here, I'm going to change that from unitless to candelas. No particular reason for that. It's just when I was building this, that's what it came out to be. I'm going to set the intensity to 11. I'm going to leave the light color as is. We'll set the attenuation to 1000. The source width, I'll bring that up to 850. Makes it much wider. And we'll increase the height to 170. I'm going to jump out of the camera just so you can get a look at this and take a look at that light and see what we have going on. That's the rect light. So you can see how that I've set that up to light up the text there. Go back into our camera. And before I add any more lights in, I'm going to make some adjustments to our default scene. And the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and I don't need this directional light anymore. So I'm going to delete it. And then I'm going to go to the post-process volume, and I'm going to make an adjustment to our exposure compensation. I'm going to bring that down to 6. We may come back to that and adjust it a little bit more. But I have one more light that I want to add in. Let me scrub through and look at our text. And I'm going to add one more rect light in. So I'm going to go over here to my lights, double click rect light one more time, select that one, and make some adjustments. Bring it up and change it to movable. For the location properties, I'm going to set X to a -70. We'll leave Y to 0, and we'll set Z to 285. Then we'll jump down, and we're going to change our units to candelas again and set that to 40. And what I'm trying to do with this light is light up the background. So I'm going to drop down to my source width and my source height to open this up a good bit, all the way to 1000 on both of them. And then I'm going to jump into all of those lights and make sure that they are not casting shadows. And I will go back into our post-process volume and adjust that intensity a little bit. Let's bring that up. We'll try 7, maybe 8 on that. All right, that looks a lot better. And you can continue to work with the lighting as you see fit, whatever mood you're trying to create, whatever you're wanting to do in there. And let's take a look at the animation that we have now at this point. I think one thing that I'm going to do is this second text, I want it to come in a little bit faster. So I'll adjust that. So I'm going to select the text in the sequencer and start moving this forward a little bit. There we go, till I start see it coming in, maybe a little bit more. And we'll just go back, play that from the beginning and look at the timing on it. Yeah, I like that much better. And we can change the duration here. We'll set it to 168 and set that as our out time. So we've got about a 7-second, I think it might be, animation now. Go back to the beginning. I mentioned earlier in the tutorial that I would take a look at how I created these materials. So to do that very quickly, I'm going to jump into the content drawer, and here's the materials, but I'm going to go ahead and create these again. So in the content drawer, I'm going to right click and go to material. And I'll create this as gold 2 and double click on it, and it's going to open up the material. Let me editor and dock that right there so we can see it clearly. And this panel right here is where we will set our base color, specular, and roughness. To do that, I'm just going to click right here and drag, and I'm going to search for a constant, and I need a constant 3 vector. What that means is it has 3 vectors, and with it being attached to the base color, it knows that I want red, green, and blue. So this is going to be my base color, so I can double click in here and drag that to somewhere in that yellow zone, create kind of a gold look somewhere in there. May come back and adjust that. Hit OK on that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to add some roughness to this. This is kind of a shiny look to it. And we are going to need another constant. We just need a normal constant. And you'll see with that being added in, the default value is 0. And this material now becomes very shiny. The next thing that I'm going to add in is metallic. So I'll drag out from metallic, and we'll do the same thing, add a constant in for it. And it is, let me move these two in place. And it's set at 0 also, but we'll bring that up to 1. And you'll see we get that very metallic look. So working with these, we can adjust them to different degrees and get different looks of metals that we might want. So that is the gold material that I created. I'm going to hit apply right there and save that. And then we'll jump back in and take a look again in the content drawer. I have this shiny yellow and this shiny blue, so I'll create one of those very quickly, just another color. So again, I'm going to right click in there, go to material. Very similar to what we created just a minute ago. I'll make this red. Double click, go into the material editor. Very simple. Just going to pull this out for a constant 3 vector. There's our color option. And if I want red, then I'll drag over here. So we'll bring this hue all the way down to 0, and then we can adjust from there. Set that to 0.5 and hit OK. And if all we want is just some roughness, we can bring that out, add in that constant again, and there is our reflections and our highlights added in. And again, you can adjust that anywhere from 0 to 1. So we'll try 0.5. A little bit duller color, 0.2. You see we get a little bit more of the shine back in, and down to 0. And then if you do want to add the metallic in, again, you can pull that out and set a constant. And so those are the materials that I created. And once you create a material, it's going to be in the project, and you can. So if I did want to change on this text, that front color, and so it is available. So if I wanted to change this front material here, I can search for that red. And let's see, right there. Doesn't look real pretty, but you get the idea. So I'll undo that, change it back. I hope this tutorial on the Unreal text editor gets you started. I'll be creating many more tutorials on working with Unreal Engine motion design tools, so hit the like and subscribe button to catch those when they're released.